See, Ray, we're not always just a hockey podcast, right?
This will be a benefit.
We delve into all worlds. Sporting worlds, yes. The entertainment world on occasion. But what a pleasure and a privilege to have former manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, John Gibbons, joining us on the podcast. Not only is he a former manager, I mean, that in and of itself, Ray, is enough to earn a spot here on the Ray and Dregs podcast. But he's a fellow host of the Gibby Show podcast and co-author of Gibby Tales of a Baseball Lifer with Greg Oliver. John Gibbons, welcome to the podcast. Man, you're a busy dude. You've got a lot going on these days.
Yeah, a little bit too busy, but hey, is it just like a slow week in hockey or what? Is it you got a week off or something? Or you guys got
No, never. It's the start of baseball, and you're such a character, John. Just so much fun when you were managing the Jays. Did you know when you took the job that the Jays reached so far in Canada?
No, I didn't. But one thing when I started out, the team we weren't very good. For a lot of years. You guys know that it was 22 years anyway.
Yeah.
But people would always say, hey, if the team's relevant in September or in the second part of the season, watch what happens to Toronto and around the country, right? But we never saw it because the Red Sox and the Yankees would run away with it in June. We were sitting there, and this was before all the extra wild card stuff too. So, but then when it happened in 2015, Anthopoulos pulled off some great deals, and we just caught fire. And then it was amazing. It was everything everybody ever talked about. And it's still there. It disappeared a little bit when they went through the rebuild, and then you had COVID. But it seems to be back.
Well, when I live out in the West Coast, and so in 1975, I started. I was an 11-year-old kid, and these two rookies, Jim Rice and Fred Lynn, came in, and I'm like, oh my God, I love these guys, and so I became a Red Sox fan. Then I was the Expos fan, and then the Jays came, and it just seemed every layer of it gave us one more reason to cheer, and so way back to Otto Velez in the first Blue Jays, man, it was like when you guys had it. It was like it became on the front page of everything. It's really cool. And I wondered, like, managing in that, do you notice it, or do you just get stuck doing what you're doing day to day?
No, you definitely notice it. Heck, you got a whole country, behind you. One team up there, and it was, when we went out west, especially Seattle, that's when you really noticed it. They would take over that whole stadium, and we traveled good in the U.S. too. But you get caught up in your grind, when you have the daily stuff of the team. But you go outside. It's definitely noticeable, and whether we're in Yankee Stadium or Fenway. So are you? Are you still a Red Sox guy or what?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It was more fun when they were not winning. It was actually kind of like this is our team that never wins, and it was kind of fun. And then they won the 4 times, and I'm like, man. Yeah, not as much anymore. I kind of like pissing and moaning, Gibby. I kind of like pissing and moaning. Exactly. They're like, oh, they lost again.
Hey, my mom and dad are both born and raised in Boston, right? My dad joined the military, and that's how I ended up in Texas. But, I tell everybody, I got that Boston blood run through me. That's the asshole in me, When you
can't escape. You can't escape.
Yeah, but the worst thing could ever happen was when they finally won it, because now they got nothing to bitch about. I say that all the time,
Yeah, sir.
John Gibbons joining us here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. And John, before you joined us, Ray and I in Headlines had a conversation about the World Cup of hockey, because Connor McDavid, the greatest player in hockey, talked about how hockey needs the best on best format. And to a point, I think we just saw that, didn't we, in the World Baseball Classic? It comes down to the at-bat. You've got Ohtani and Mike Trout. The theater was tremendous. The entertainment was exceptional. But I'm wondering, from a manager's perspective, whether you are willing to embrace the World Baseball Classic for what it is and shelve all the risk, because we did see a couple of key baseball players get hurt in this process. So where's your mindset on all of this?
Yeah, I'm mixed too. That may when Diaz going down, the Mets may be finished now. You never know. There's a good. They're a totally different team. And then when Altuve, he's going to be out a while. Yeah, that's the risk you take. And looking back, in 2013 when we made a few trades and brought in like Jose Reyes and Burley and some guys. We're crowned champs before we ever played a game. That year was they also had a WBC, so a lot of players went to that, and so you really couldn't even get your team together,
Right.
And so I thought, did that hurt us? Probably not, but it made it tough on a manager. But I think that the game loves it. It's been good for the game. Personally, if I'm still in the dugout, I don't like it at all, because you want see what happens. But that doesn't matter now. I mean, it's all about generating the money and the audiences, and which is a good thing too. I mean, it builds the sports, but yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, like when you're in the dugout, I assume there's lots of things that happen that are, way up the food chain that you never get to touch that you would, like to, hey, I would do this or I would do that. And it seems to me like the overwhelming enthusiasm for the tournament would eventually financially push the owners into saying, hey, this is a good idea. I would love to see it because we don't get it. We never get it. The Olympics, it's been so long now since it's been best on best. And
Right.
nobody's watched Connor McDavid, who may go down as the greatest player ever, playing a best on best. And to me, it's a little silly.
You're right. Yeah, you got to take advantage of, and promote the sport, the best way you can. And you're right. He's nothing against Edmonton, I guess, but I mean, out there, you're not getting if he's playing for the Maple Leafs or something, he could probably get noticed a little more, right?
No.
Well, if you're with the Maple Leafs, if you're the assistant equipment manager, you get noticed more than anywhere else, man.
Hey, Ray, that soundbite isn't going to resonate with the Edmonton fan base even a little bit, is it?
I don't know if they know who I am out there, anyways.
Oh, they do, Gibby.
Yes, they do.
You mentioned in the dugout that this. I love baseball. It's I've loved it since I was a little boy, and one of my favorite books was Ball 4 when it was written in the day by Jim Bouton because it told tales of the dugout. Like when you go to the mound to take out a pitcher, and the whole way you're going out, that guy just wants to give it to you, and he does not want to give you the ball the whole way out there. Are you thinking, how am I going to tell this guy that he's got to come out, or am I just putting my hand out for the ball? Like, I'm fascinated by that stuff because I would be so sour if you were coming to take me out of the game.
Hey, oh yeah. I mean, that is the game right there. They're controlling the pitching staff. Nowadays, heck, these guys, the manager it doesn't even matter. All he's got to say, well, the statistics say that I should take you out. I don't care if you ever know where you're going, So they're off the hook now. But yeah, that's one of the toughest part of the game, obviously. And I was telling somebody the other day, like when Roy Halladay was there, right? Roy would always pitch you 6, 7, 8 innings, guaranteed, in a lot of times complete games. And so the toughest part about managing him is knowing when to take him out. I mean, he's a human being and he wears out every now and then. But I would never signal right away from the dugout for the change. I would always, wait till I got to the mound because he might talk you out of it, right? He's one guy you give him a chance to talk, let you talk. And but you would step out of the dugout, he'd turn over there and he'd stare at you, he'd give you that look like, what are you doing, But he was the most respectful guy, never complained, and things like that. There's some guys, you're so frustrated, you had enough, or you maybe left them in there too long. You come out of the dugout and say, "Screw it, get out of here, man. I don't want that." And then they got nothing to say. So, but yeah, and it all depends on the individual. Some guys think they're getting screwed. You're hurting them in the long run, or they can get this guy, but. You learn over time. There's signs that you watch for that this guy's done. I don't care. He may be trying to be macho or act like he wants to be the hero, but you need to make those decisions, the right decisions as a manager.
What is it? How do you manage 25 guys for 162 days? Like we play 82 games in hockey, and there are days you're like, I don't want to see anybody. I don't, I want to. Our great colleague, Bob McKenzie, calls it a small circle day, which basically means everyone else is out of the circle but me. I just want a day off from humans. Like, how do you manage that roster for that time?
Well, you know what? I was kind of a hands-off guy. I let the players police themselves, and unless I need to step in, that kind of thing. In our better teams, we have big personalities, and I think the worst thing, with playing so many games, the worst thing a manager can do is try to control things too much, and looking over everybody's shoulder, or trying to just really dictate everything that happens. So you let the boys do their thing, right, and give them some leeway. If they step out of line or they're doing something that's hurting the team, I'm talking about not only game time, that type of thing, or off the field or something like that. It's going to stain the reputations. Then you got to get involved, But they last things, they're like I've always believed the more you talk, the less they listen. It's like your own kids, right? But so if you're not talking all the time, when you finally do say something, they listen because, whoa, okay, he means it. He's just not always just, But it's different, when you have a bunch of superstars, like we had a group, that were really, really good, and they weren't well liked in the league by guys on other teams, big personalities, but very emotional. You got to sometimes you got to turn your back, man, and not see some things too, and you got to remember
Right.
they're the show. People coming to watch
Sure.
them play, and you got to let them do their thing. And a lot of times, you guys know the guys are a little nutty, man. They're your best players.
Right. Yes, they are.
John Gibbons, former manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, joining us on the Ray and Dregs podcast. And Gibby, I've got a fan question here. We're going to take one fan question, which kind of relates to the big personalities here. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You were suspended at least a couple of times. Ejected out of a handful of games, a couple anyway. So Andrew is asking,
looking at it,
Yeah.
Right. And you get to go home early. Good for you.
Andrew is asking, I'd love to hear about manager-ump interactions, getting tossed, which umps are the most sensitive, etc.
You know what? People always ask me, like, would you ever, did you ever go to get ejected to fire your team up? And I said, no, man, that's phony, right? Mine really a lot of times came down to, well, I believe too that if you want your players to fight for you, you better fight for them, And we had a number of guys on our team that they were considered whiners throughout the league, with the umpires about the strike zone, things like that. But a lot of times our guys were right, but the umpires would stick it to them. It's a little tougher now because everything's on TV and they got all but they would stick it to them when they could, right? And so I made a point, I'd watch it because that's affecting me too, So you got to fight for those guys, and we had a number of them that bitched and moaned, and it's just there's certain umpires though that they'll give you your say. It used to be you could say whatever you want in the game, and until you start calling the umpire a name, right? Then it's automatic. Nowadays though, it's especially you get a lot of these young umpires that come up, and it's like they got to make a statement early on that they're in control, and they're a little more testy, or they got the quick hook. But there's some guys that you can still go out there and have fun with, like Joe West. Joe gets remember Big Joe? I mean, he set the record for
sure.
Big old Joe. I used to say that the worst job in a clubhouse, Joe, was a big, heavy set guy, right? The worst job in that stadium on a hot day game is the clubhouse guy that's got to clean Joe West his uniform after the game. Is going to that guy's got the worst job. So, but I'd have fun with him, and he little give and take. And before the game would start, I would never take the lineup card out. But if he was covering our game, he'd always say something to the coach that we sent out there about a little joke or jab towards me. So it was a lot of fun and a lot of give and take,
Awesome.
But there's some guys too that just have a chip on your shoulder and they're just bad, They get there for whatever reason and they're just bad. Just like
and
times,
Yeah, but here's the thing too. You got one of those guys that you don't get along with, and you got him for a 4-game set. You got to look at him for 4 days. I'm sure that's got to be really hard.
Oh yeah.
It would be. I was the best official that I knew, and I never officiated a game, and so I had some significant issues that I didn't figure out till later. I wasn't getting any calls, so that would be a tough one for me.
Yeah, even most of those guys are pretty good too. You got to give them credit where it's due, And then some of them are just bad, and they can have bad days and all that. But I'm telling you, we were talking about the Red Sox a while ago. You used to go to if you went to play in Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium, there was a different strike zone, man. For them and for us. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to hear the crying. But it's something you just got to deal with. But if you got them for a four-game series. That day that they're behind the plate is the day you keep an eye on, because they can influence it, and not like they're trying to screw you necessarily, but there's certain guys they'll take it out on.
Yeah. Now you mentioned a big personality. One thing I will never forget was I was flying into Pittsburgh, and you know how far it is from Pittsburgh to downtown when you're in a cab or on the bus.
Yeah.
You got to go through that big tunnel. It takes forever. So you guys were playing Texas in the playoffs, and the score was, I think it was 3-2, and the app that I was following never updated the score. I'm like, it was the whole way in. I'm like, what the hell is going on in Toronto? And it was the bat flip and at the time I'm like, man, I can't believe Jose Bautista flipped the bat like that. And when I went back and looked at it, I'm like, he should have thrown that thing out of the stadium. It was so charged in there. Could that be among the most explosive moments of your managerial career?
Well, yeah, it's got to be the top one of my career, and
it was unreal.
Yeah, and that home run will go down in not only history in baseball, but obviously in Blue Jays history, because been 22 years of frustration, right? And it really came down to the perfect guy. I don't think anybody else hits that home run. It's not as impactful as Bautista, right? Because he was the face of the franchise through a lot of struggling years. Yet he was one of the best players in the game. And for him, and just the way it all set up, it was just a perfect. And he was like I said earlier. I mean, nobody liked him in the league, unless he was on your own team. And even some of those guys would question it, But so it's like the villain, man. The villain sticks it to the old, I'm a Texan, but the good guys, Texas Rangers, man. So, and that place just erupted, but that he'll be known for that forever. He had a tremendous career, obviously, but you look at even Joe Carter's walk-off home run to win a World Series. It doesn't get any better than that, right? But I almost view this, maybe because I was there. I said this will almost be recognized as much as that one, and that was a World Series.
Well, you know what, Gibby, we could talk baseball for hours because Ray, as you can tell, is a huge baseball fan.
Yeah,
but look, I'm not sure how much research you did in coming on to the Ray and Dregs podcast, but you may have known that Ray Ferraro has a little bit of baseball history on his side too. Little League World Series. Ray, what year was that?
I don't remember. 1976.
Really?
Yeah. Our
team
team won the Canadian Championship. We were from this town of about 8,000 people. And I don't know how the hell we made it all the way through, but we went to Williamsport, and
that is awesome.
I was second baseman. Trail, BC. Do you remember a guy named Jason Bay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The outfielder, yeah.
Jason's much younger, but he went to the World Series as well when his team came up 5 times from our little town. We're pretty proud of it. It was the best.
That's an accomplishment.
It was the best.
Hey, I played my first Little League baseball game in Goose Bay, Labrador.
That's right.
Air Force Base.
How did you end up there? Oh, okay. I was going to say, how did you end up there?
Yeah, it was funny. My dad was stationed up there for 2 years. When my mom and dad, when we all got there, the other people who were stationed up there would ask my mom and dad, said, "What did you do to get punished, man?" They gave me an assignment in Goose Bay, Labrador. That was kind of the joke, right? And my mom and dad told me that was like one of their fondest assignments they ever had in the military, So, but that's where it all started for me. Hey, well, congrats, man. That's pretty damn good. You get to the Little League World Series.
Yeah, I'm going to make a trip back there. I loved it so much. It was such a great memory in my life, and I want to go back. And now, I'm I work for ESPN, so I should be able to get tickets somehow. I mean, they do run the thing, right?
Hey, I got one for you guys.
Jimmy,
The first official hockey game I ever saw was in 1984. I was with the Mets. We were playing up in Montreal. You know, we had a day off, and Rusty Staub was on the team, our team. You know, and he got some tickets. It was a Islander Canadian playoff game at the Old Forum. That was my first taste of hockey, right? And then the following week we were back in New York, and we went and saw another game out there in Nassau Coliseum. I think hadn't the Islanders won 4 in a row at that point, and that was Edmonton.
They did. You kind of cheated walking into some of the best that you were ever going to see.
No kidding.
The best building. The Forum was amazing, right? The Forum was like old Yankee Stadium. It was a cathedral in that place. What a place to go. Tell me you had a hot dog, Gibby. Tell me you had a hot dog in there.
I had a little bit of everything in there, man. I'll tell you, I love hockey. You know, I don't quite understand it all. I don't necessarily watch a lot of it. I watch some highlights. But you know why? You know why I like it so much, and obviously you guys know too. It's just a good hard nose. You got to give it everything you got, sport. You can't get away with slacking out. Baseball, you guys can dog and stuff like that. Hockey, you have to get a great effort. And guys are tough. You don't get these guys in baseball. They get a lot of hangnails and they can't play. And it's like, what the heck, So I tip my hat to you guys, man. It's so different,
Gibby, did you have an offbeat favorite teammate? Like, I'm sure you had 100 of them, but is there one that people might be surprised at? You go, like every time you were around him, you either laughed or he did something goofy or he was a good player, but people wouldn't know about.
Oh, as a teammate?
Yeah, or a guy you come across.
Well, actually, I don't know if I should even say this, but Lenny Dykstra was one of my great friends, right? We were roommates in the minor leagues. Everybody knows who he is, but he's turned into a real degenerate, But so I don't want to talk about him. He's a great friend of mine. But it's funny. I saw him at a card show a few years ago, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And he's missing some teeth. He'd been in jail or whatever, you name it. But to answer your question, every time we get together, we laugh, man. We reminisce about the old days, and this was in the early '80s in little redneck town, Shelby, North Carolina. Yeah, he's. I hate to see what happened to him, but and I hate to even admit it sometimes. But no, you got to stick by your friends, right?
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, Gibby, we'll let you go there, man. We'll have you back on the podcast again. All the best with the book. The podcast is sensational. I mean, you're still beloved here in Toronto as former manager of the Blue Jays. So stay well, and thanks for taking the time to join us.
Well, guys, hey, man, I sure appreciate you having me on the show, man. As big and successful as you guys are, man, it's pretty good for us.
No, thank you, Gibby. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe up there.
Yeah.